Three police officers have been shot dead during a raid in the southern Jordanian city of Maan. The officers were looking for people involved in killing a senior commander during protests against rising fuel prices last week. Police officials say one of the suspects was killed during the raid. 9 people were arrested. Let's speak to Rami G Khouri, who's the director of global engagement at the American University of Beirut and a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. He's joining us live from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome back to Al Jazeera. How concerning is this for the authorities in Jordan?
It's concerning, but it's routinely concerning in the sense that this has been going on for about 40 years or so. The first big incidents they had were back in the late 1980s, and I was actually living and working in Jordan, and I spent some days down there and writing a report about the situation in Maan. And it's been clear ever since then that there are structural problems that are economic in Maan, poverty, unemployment, neglect, and there are political problems, tensions between the local residents and the central government. And this is not unique in Maan. It's all over the provincial areas of Jordan, at Tafili, Mafra, other places where populations that had lived a decent life for many, many decades suddenly found themselves marginalized starting in the 1970s and 80s. And this led to unemployment. And then with the oil boom, it led to more corruption, neglect. So these are all structural issues. They flare up regularly, every 3, 4, 5 years. And this is the latest flare up. So there's very little that's unique about this situation, but it is troubling because it keeps getting worse because the underlying economic and social and political tensions continue to worsen.
Right, but if we look at the recent past, back in 2018, there were protests at the time rather, and then there were promises made to reform. And this latest flare-up that you speak of, we understand, has been spearheaded by truck drivers complaining about the rising cost of living and the cost of fuel in the country. So why do you think not much has changed for Jordanians since at least 2018 when these promises were made?
It's because the economic system in Jordan is simply unable, like it is, by the way, across virtually the entire Arab region, except for the oil-producing countries. The system is unable to create enough decent jobs for the growing number of citizens. Jordan had a population of about 1.5 million in the 1970s when I first lived there. And then when I moved away 30 years later, had a population of around 7 million. The government cannot provide jobs. The private sector cannot provide jobs. Social services have been declining all across the Arab region, and this is typical in Jordan. And you have the added problem of rural communities like Maan that had lived a pretty decent life for actually a couple of centuries when they were on the main caravan route between Damascus and the holy Islamic sites in the Hijaz. But then they became sidelined when a new highway was built, and they lost most of their economic income. Same thing happened with other cities all across provincial Jordan that had lived off agriculture or trade or other things. So these are structural issues that the government simply has been unable to deal with. They've tried really hard and sincerely. The government is trying to figure it out, but the system is not successful. Unemployment rises, disparities and inequalities increase. People feel neglected, and that's why some of the signs that people were holding up in these demonstrations use the word dignity, karama.
Right.
That people don't mind. They can live if they're poor somehow, but if they're mistreated and they're not given the attention they deserve as citizens, they feel that their dignity has been taken away. And this combines with the latest problem in Jordan and other parts of the region, which is the movements like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The government uses the word takfiri to talk about the people who are, and they use that general word, but it's really the linkages between disenchanted, sometimes desperate citizens and the Islamist militants who come in and try to take advantage of that.
Rami Khouri, thank you so much.
It's a real web.
Thank you so much. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks for speaking to us from Massachusetts.